Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Puppet Masters and Castle Freaks, the All Things Charles Band podcast that is full of germs and sperm, frankly, to be honest with you. I am one of your hosts, Jared Hornbeck, coming to you from Brooklyn, New York, currently doing my favorite thing, which is beating co-eds in the shower with a bat. But I am not creeping around this sorority house alone. Who is here with me?
It's the Betty Crocker of butchering, Steve Guntley. This is the podcast all about dick biting, strip poker, and cannibalism. Just lots and lots of cannibalism. I forgot to write a third one, so I'm just going to say cannibalism. That's because this is a podcast about Delta Delta Die, a gleefully trashy throwback to sorority row horror, and part of the very brief Shadow Films logo that Charles Band was involved with. And we are joined by a very special guest today. We're very excited. Jared, who's here with us today?
We sure are. We have a really special guest with us today. It is Heather Wixson, and she has been a writer for The Daily Dead forever, currently writing the series on monsters, makeup, and effects, and really excitingly, co-author of the In Search of Darkness book, which is available for pre-order now and shipping sometime in the near future. So excited about that book. Heather, we're really appreciative that you took the time to join us. What's going on?
Thank you guys so much. Yeah, it's really exciting. All the pre-orders for In Search of Darkness are shipping out now, and they only did like a limited run of them because they're big and they're expensive and things like that. So there's only now, I think we're at like a little under 300 copies left, and then when they're done, they're done. There is going to be like another edition of it to come out hopefully later this year. That's like a little more price sensitive, as I like to say, because I get it. You know, it's a big ask, but it's a huge, beautiful book. And we're really, really proud. It's funny. I was gonna say this afterwards, but like once my co-author on this book, Patrick Brownlee, hears that I was on a Full Moon Charles Band podcast, he's gonna flip his lid because he is like Mr. Charles Band. So you guys should definitely get Patrick on this eventually too. Because
get him on the horn. Get him on.
Yes. For sure. I'm going to like hook you guys up because he's like, he loves Charlie like so much. And I do too. Like I grew up watching a lot of Empire stuff back in the day, and then the switch over to Full Moon and everything. But yeah, so this was really cool and I appreciate it.
Well, and you brought a movie to our and excuse me, everybody, I'm coming over off of a cold. So if I sound a little gravelly and gross, I apologize. But you actually brought this movie to our attention. You know, obviously we had it in the spreadsheet, but I knew nothing about what this movie was or what the Shadow Films era of Full Moon entailed. But I was on board once I saw the title. As always, Charlie Band is a great way with titles. And this one really caught my attention. I would say this is a movie that delivers on that title as well. Like not only by the fact that it is diegetically in the film, but it embodies the spirit of a movie called Delta Delta Die, which means we're going to see a lot of attractive young co-eds getting murdered in gross ways. We're going to see a lot of very over-the-top performances, and it's going to err on the side of bad taste over good taste. And I think this delivered exactly on that.
I would agree with that. I think that, you know, this promises everything that. Now, I was looking at this from the Tubi poster art. I never saw, you know, the original poster or one sheet, or I don't even know if that was really how Charlie was pushing these movies at that point. But based on, you know, what I saw when I pulled it up on Tubi, you know, in my little mental checklist of am I going to get this, am I going to get this, and am I going to get this? You get it all in this movie and Brink Stevens. So
you do,
you get it all in Brink Stevens, which is
brought us to the brink once again. Yeah, which is we appreciate that. I've got a little bit of facts and figures about this movie. So Delta Delta Die was released July 23rd, 2003. It's written and directed by Devin Hamilton, and it stars Julie Strain, Brink Stevens, Joe Dane, Tiffany Shepis, Rachel Myers, Jennifer L. Johnson, Karen Smith, and Lizzie Strain. So first of all, this is our first opportunity ever to talk about Julie Strain, who I feel like if they were to make a Mount Rushmore of Skinamax actresses from the 90s, she would definitely be up there. It's like her and Shannon Tweed, and you know, maybe Brink fits in there. Why not? So Julie Strain, she was a very beautiful 6'1" model who was a Penthouse Pet of the Year in 1993. She transitioned over to acting with bit parts in marginal 90s action hits like Out for Justice and Double Impact. But she went on to become a staple.
Marginal? I'm sorry, Steve.
They
I
are
take
marginal.
offense
They are.
to Out for
Nothing,
Justice is a
nothing
movie
in
I've
the
seen so many times
nothing
in
in
my
the
life.
Steven Seagal canon rises above the word marginal. His very best movie, probably Under Siege, is still a marginal movie. I'm putting my stamp down on that one.
I don't know, man. Under Siege is pretty great, and Above the Law, that's the first one. That's the one with Kelly LeBrock, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe you're right.
Pretty great, and definitely staples of 90s cable for sure. And so I take offense to your dismissal of these properties.
I will say I find the career and the existence of Steven Seagal to be far more fascinating than anything he did on film. He is an interesting, bizarre, horrible person who lucked into a major Hollywood career for almost a decade. Well, more than a decade, but that's a whole other podcast that I will happily get started on right now.
Patreon.com, save Steven Seagal.
yeah, all the Patreon funds will go towards getting Steven Seagal back onto the police force. But Julie Strain, she went on to become a staple of cheesy made-for-cable erotica like Lethal Ladies, Bikini Hotel, Victims of Desire, movies like that. Her biggest mainstream role probably came in 2000 because she was cast as the lead in the long-awaited animated sequel, Heavy Metal 2000. And I didn't know much about that movie. Sorry, the cat is being a terrorist. I didn't know much about the movie. I've never seen either of the Heavy Metals, weirdly. That's kind of a big gap for me. But I do know that this second movie was advertised heavily on her presence in the movie. So that's kind of a big deal. And that is going to be a video game we cover on my other show, Cinema Arcade, as well. So one of these days I will have to watch Heavy Metal 2000. But yeah, so Julie Strain was married to the co-creator of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Kevin Eastman. I did not know this. They were married for like more than a decade. They divorced in 2006. And unfortunately, Julie Strain struggled with brain damage. She was in a horrible horse riding accident when she was in her 20s that led to almost total amnesia of her entire childhood years. She pretty much lost everything before the accident. And it led to degenerative brain problems later on in her life. By 2018, she was suffering early onset dementia, and we sadly lost her in 2021 at the age of 58. So very sad. She left behind a career of more than 100 sleazy fun movies, much like Delta Delta Die. And also there's a Lizzie Strain in this movie. I could not confirm if they are in any way related to Julie Strain. I don't think they are, but there is another actress in this named Lizzie Strain. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about Shadow Films, because that all comes back to our director here, Devin Hamilton. Devin Hamilton is a graduate of University of North Carolina. He started working for video store chains across the country, as a kid who's just fascinated with movies. And eventually he got hired to work over in the marketing side of Full Moon. Now, Full Moon at this time was in a bit of a rough transitional period, as they often are. Let's be honest. They're constantly having to find new sources for funding and things to keep them afloat. Their newest venture was an attempt to partner up with 20th Century Fox on a sub-label called Shadow Entertainment. And they had one film that Fox agreed to bankroll, and that's the movie Deadly Stingers, which is a giant scorpion movie, kind of a throwback to old 50s sort of atomic age monster movies. The production wound up being really troubled and horrible. Everybody involved in it had a really bad time, and the movie finally came out. It was hastily retitled as Mega Scorpions, given that kind of Sci-Fi Channel, Asylum Pictures sort of Photoshop job as a cover, and then just slapped onto DVD shelves and forgotten about completely. So that was not a very good start to that partnership. It dissolved almost immediately, but it left Charlie Band with this little sub-label called Shadow, which he now renamed Shadow Films. So when Devin Hamilton came on at Full Moon, he thought, let me direct a couple of these on this sub-label. We'll put them out. I worked at video stores. I know exactly what they are looking to hear and what they're looking to sell, and I can just make those movies for that, and I guarantee it'll be better than 90% of the stuff that gets out there. So Charlie Band, never resistant to a good pitch, says, go ahead, do your thing. And Devin Hamilton basically makes his 3 Shadow Films movies almost overlapping, almost at the same time. The first one is a slasher called Bleed, which is kind of like a low-level Scream knockoff. I never saw it, but we'll get to that one eventually.
Very cool poster.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just a bunch of the bloody knife and like the white mask and things like that. You know, so not necessarily unique for a lot of horror movie covers at that time, but it's still, I remember that one standing out. He also shot a sort of riff on The Craft called Birthright, which came out just around the same time. These were both very, very modest budget movies. I think like 45 and 75 were the totals for these movies. This third movie, Delta Delta Die, was the one that he was really looking forward to making because he wanted it to be a nice throwback to the early 80s, late 70s sorority row, like horror boom that was kind of happening. You get movies like Black Christmas and House on Sorority Row and Slumber Party Massacre and like things like this. So, you know, you get this provocative title. He had relationships with Brinke Stevens and Julie Strain, who had both made cameos in his earlier two films. So he's like, can I write bigger roles for you two to kind of come in and basically be the leads of this thing? We'll shoot it in 9 days and we'll knock it out. And that's basically what happened. He was working on all three of these things at the same time whilst he was working his marketing job at Full Moon. They all came out within a few months of each other. And there was going to be a fourth one. This was going to be a movie called Roid Rage, which was a sort of like a sort of companion piece to Delta Delta Die, taking place in a fraternity with a bunch of bodybuilding jocks who started experimenting with like a Jekyll and Hyde style steroid combination that turns them evil. Sounds really fun. But unfortunately, Full Moon had hit one of its many low ebbs, as it often did, and Devin Hamilton was among the crew that was fired from that production.
I was going to say Devin Hamilton sounds a lot to me like a more gore-focused David Dakota in a lot of ways, and now I really feel that way when you say that the potential Roid Rage movie that was going to follow. And in the sorority movies, you failed, Steve, to mention one of my very favorites, Hell Night.
Oh, Hell Night. Okay, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But, you know, Heather, I want to bring you into this here because, okay, so a little inside baseball for some people. Some guests choose movies. Other ones will ask, what do you think is a good fit? You know, do you have a suggestion?
Yeah, we'll show them a spreadsheet or we'll give them a nice mystery.
Right. Or I'll send a list to somebody. And a lot of times they'll come back with a choice and I'm like, oh, well, you know, somebody grabbed that one already. And you got to maybe look a little more obscure than that. And then maybe some of the like really big titles are still kind of on hold. Your email came back immediately with Delta Delta Die. And I looked at it and I went, huh. And then I said, that's a good sign because this is one of the ones that was being overlooked, like myself as well as Steve on the spreadsheet. Like, really, I didn't really know this one. I feel like I would scroll past it and I would be like, oh, well, you know, that's a movie that exists. We'll get there eventually. And so I want to know, like, you picked this one. And if it wasn't just that picking this movie blindly, you know, where did you encounter this movie for the first time? Like Shadow Entertainment is very much like we can call it like the bloody Torchlight. Like we're getting to, you know, we're getting to Torchlight Town again almost, but it's slightly different. And this pick was so different. I was thrilled when I first saw it because I went, I'm going to get to watch something I've never seen before. And it was someone's first pick. And I'm really curious about that. And so, yeah, like where did you discover this movie? It couldn't have been on my list, right?
No, it actually was not. I used to, when I lived in Chicago, I used to go to a horror convention out there called Flashback Weekend. Eventually, like I went back and was actually co-host for like 10 years, which was super cool. And Charlie always is there, peddling his wares as he does. But I remember it was sort of like around 2004 or 5. They showed a bunch of like Full Moon movies, like in like this room downstairs from like the main convention. They had like a little screening room set up.
It's the room where you don't want anyone to see you. That's what it is.
Yeah,
like,
you just want to go chill for like 30, 60 minutes or whatever. And one of the movies that they were showing, one day they were doing like a bunch of like Charlie band movies. And this was one of them. And like, admittedly, there's the film snob in me is just like, oh my God, what the hell is this? But I liked it. And I was like, hey, this is kind of fun because we're so used to like, I mean, especially in the early 2000s where there's a certain dynamic that happens in horror where, you know, we still were very much seeing women in peril, things like that. And I liked how this sort of changed it up. And then it also like introduced me into sort of this new grouping of horror legends in terms of like Brink Stevens, and also Tiffany Shepis, because I didn't know much about them before this. And so I was like, okay, that was kind of fun. I mean, it's got rough edges. I mean, most full moon movies do, but that's what makes them full moon. Like that's the fun of it to me. I don't need perfection when I watch a movie. I mean, I have a poster of Howling 2 on my kitchen. Like, believe me, I'm not looking for perfection when I watch a movie. So it was like I thought it was very different because I really was like honestly going into it expecting more of a slasher because I heard the name and I was like, oh, let's go watch a slasher movie, you know, kind of coming out of like the run of Scream 1 through 3, you know. And then it was different also because it's not really set up like a slasher. It's very much like this empowered group of women basically are, you know, collecting victims so that they can cannibalize them and sell their meat and their Delta pie, you know, their wares and things like that. And I just was like, wow, this is so weird. And it's funny now, because I hadn't rewatched it since then. So it's been like 18 years since I'd seen it. So now living in Los Angeles and watching it was so different for me because like the house that they used the exterior for the sorority house, I literally did a junket there for the Grudge movie that came out in like 2020.
Oh my God. That's funny.
Because they rent that house out for like all kinds of events and stuff. And I was like, no way. And I literally went to my phone and found the picture and there's like a picture, I'm totally blanking on the actor who plays like the realtor, but there was like a realtor sign. I was like, holy shit, it really is that house. And then also like seeing the backlot area where I'm like, oh, that's so, it's not Sunset Studios, but not Scream Fest, but there's like Shriek Fest, would do their film festival there. And I was like, we used to literally walk through this corridor where they're shooting like those videos and doing the table thing. And I was like, oh my God, this is so weird. So it was really fun to kind of catch up with it again because it changed like everything for me. Like I thought it was fun back then, but it was like, yeah, okay, whatever, move on.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, wow, this is like, they really tried something. And I appreciate that. Like they really tried to like change dynamics, sort of change what was going on in horror at the time. Doing it, you know, I know Full Moon works with like zero budget. Like, basically like what Trauma has, they probably have less of sometimes. And that's because I had a friend who worked for them and it was a little sketchy. You know, wasn't paid very often and was like, hey, we can't pay you this week. Do you want some movies? And that was kind of how it worked out sometimes.
The recurring thread of this show is that everybody has the same two things to say about Charles Band. One, very nice, very sincere, very enthusiastic guy. Two, horrible financier, terrible manager, like does really bad with money.
Yeah, I mean, at least he tries to like get people paid eventually. Lloyd, I've heard a lot of horror stories about in the 80s, where like somebody almost died and like they didn't even pay them, let alone try to help with the hospital bills. And I was like, oh wow, okay. But yeah, like, and I think it's like also for me too, it's like I've always loved sort of the independent side of horror because it's like you just find anything. Like Warner Brothers is not making Delta die. You know what I mean?
It's shocking that this was almost part of a Fox deal, you know, like this feels so low rent even for, you know, like Full Moon started as a subarm of Paramount, and those early films, they're not prestige films, but they do have a little bit more sheen of professionalism to them than something like this one does. So it is hard to imagine that this would work hand in hand with the studio.
Yeah, no, I was absolutely, because when I was rewatching it, my other half walked through the room and he's like, "Are you watching Skinamax?" And I was like, "No, it's Delta die," because it's shot just exactly like
what this movie.
He just revealed exactly how he knows Julie Strain. Yeah, he just revealed exactly where he knows Julie Strain.
What this movie really looks like this movie really looks like a 2002 episode of MTV's Undressed.
Oh my God, yes.
Like, yeah, it's got that like TV, like almost like soap opera quality at times to it. Yeah, and that's just like this is something you see. I mean, I kind of lament everything from this era that's shot on early digital because I just feel like it all just looks so bad. Like I feel like you can get behind the mindset at the time of being like, well, we need to move away from film because it's expensive and it's grainy, and if we shoot on digital, it's cheaper and it's not going to look as old and outdated. And then it's like the things you can do when remastering a film print compared to what you can do with digital is so crazy. And it's like I remember when I first saw Inland Empire and being like, I don't like the way this movie looks. Like
Yeah.
I just remember being like, I'm into some of the stuff that's going on. I can stare at these rabbits for another 2 hours, but like it just looked so bad. And I mean, and I think this movie predates this. Now, I could be wrong in this because I didn't come across it in reading, and generally I know this kind of stuff. But Steve, maybe you caught this. Was this shot digitally, or was this videotape?
I could tell you for a fact because my other half, he's an editor, and he was just like, "Oh, those are like the DVD." He's like, "That's totally DVD," and he like mentioned it. He's like, "Those are the tapes we used to do for red carpet interviews," and I was like, only the highest quality.
It seems like they might have been lucky to get that, you know, at this era of Full Moon and like for the budgets that they're working with. It seems like they're fortunate to get that much.
Yeah, those tapes weren't cheap in the 2000s.
No, and I think what this movie has a lot in common with a film we watched last week called The Dead Hate the Living, which was also shot around this era, in that they are both clearly made by filmmakers who have some intelligence and have some knowledge about how film works, and who are working with budgets that are not really allowing them to capitalize on that. But like structurally, this movie is sound. Like I think the bones are here and the bones are really good. And I think he does have a better sense of pacing and irony and camp than a lot of movies around this time. Because this is a straight up like 1980s, like Joan Collins, like campy slap down just with a couple of like B-level scream queens, which is so fun. Like the moments where Brink Stevens and Julie Strain come together on screen to like duke it out and trade one-liners are treated as if this is Freddie and Jason coming together for the first time. You know,
I was going to say it's like I was going to say it's like the Sugar Baker sisters.
Oh, sure. Sure. Yeah, that too. They were the inspiration for the Freddie versus Jason. So yeah, that all makes sense. Yeah, but no, this is
Delta
like so much. Yeah, Delta Bird.
Sorry, everyone.
Go to hell for that.
No, that should literally be a T-shirt. Are you kidding me? I would buy that shirt.
Oh my God. I mean, yeah, no, it is a really fun and goofy movie. Like, and it moves a lot better than a lot of the movies that we talk about on this show, which is always very nice. And I think a lot of it is helped by Julie Strain, who is an old hat at this kind of movie by now, who always committed 100%. Like she always just like throws herself in there and clearly looks like she is having fun. You know, she gets this crazy like music video style montage where she's wearing like basically nothing and rubbing like bloody knives all over her body and like shoving human meat parts into something that looks like a sketch comedy like reject, you know, of like an old timey like what's a who's it machine. You know, she's just like dumping a bunch of organs in there and like dancing around and snarling. And I'm just like, you are having the time of your life. Like you clearly, it feels like the director just said, okay, just do whatever, just go nuts. And she took that note and went with it, and it's really fun.
Oh yeah.
You know, a generous read of this movie could say that it's got kind of feminist undertones, you know, but that's a very generous read.
I mean, I am generous, and I would say like it again for a movie coming out sort of in the heyday of, you know, we have French extremism, and then we saw the American extremism movement kind of come through. It's nice to see a movie where women are in control.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, there's lots of boobs, but you know, hey, good, they're controlling them, so that's okay.
Yeah.
For me, I think my favorite scene is when Brink goes into the shower, and it like, and it just hangs like so long and so weird, and I'm just like, there's no way. Like, I feel like at some point one of the women should have been like, you know, maybe this scene would play like this, because it plays exactly like a guy thinks that's like scene would play.
Yeah.
Whereas the girl, she's just kind of like, oh no, you caught me, get out of here, you freak. But it's like, but everybody's like still lingering for a second. Like
Yeah.
it's not very reactionary at all.
No, it's very get out of here, you freak. Now I'm going to wait here to exchange 10 more lines of dialogue as you explain who you are.
Exactly. And then go get your baseball bat.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I can't be mad at it because I feel like, you know, the thing is, it's like whether we want to, like, there is like sort of this hierarchy in horror.
Yeah.
And to be able to see like performers like Julie and Brink like really get a chance to like star in a movie. They're not just there to like add their name to it, like to the artwork to sell it a little better. Like they're there to own that shit. And it was really, and I think that's really cool because I really like Brink a lot. I think she's kind of one of those undersung heroes where, you know, again, in the 2000s, you were getting a lot of people who were like, oh, if we put this one sort of notable name on, you know, we're going to be able to get distribution overseas, or, you know, somebody, you know, is going to see this and yeah, we can sell it to Family Video or something like that. So I like the fact that this wasn't that this actually gave pretty much all the girls kind of like their own little stories to deal with. And it's fun. Like it really is. And I loved, having characters Patrice and Clarice, like,
yeah.
I mean, I just, every time they would say their names together, I giggled. Like, I'm sorry if I'm a simpleton, but I giggled.
No, I'm with you. They were setting up a lot of dynamics that maybe didn't really pay off in an hour and 15-minute long movie. Like it seems like some of the sisters like have kind of a catty thing with each other, and like some are clearly more bloodthirsty than others, but like there isn't a point where like one of these girls becomes the good one, you know, who tries to speak out against it. Like they are all pretty much on board with the killing and eating of men this entire movie.
I want
to should mention is what this movie is about.
It sure is. I want to piggyback a little bit off of what Heather was just saying about Brink Stevens. I think it's cool because this movie obviously was made with sorority babes and the Slimeball Bowl-orama firmly in mind. And in that movie, she is like in the initiation, and here she's a veteran of the sorority. And I like that dichotomy of it's like she's an old seasoned veteran now. You know, she's not a pledge like she is in Sorority Babes of the Slimeball Bowl-orama. So there is a little bit of a growth and change in her character there. And I want to highlight also the time that Tiffany Shepis is having in this movie, because I mean, really for me, I think of her as early Trauma. I think of her Tromeo and Juliet and Citizen Toxie, those early movies. But she has, you know, gone on to have a 25-ish year-long career, specializing in like B movies and indie movies and stuff. And I think like you could tell watching this movie, which is reasonably early on in her filmography, like that she just has a super fun energy, and it, you know, and it's cool to see her pop up in non-genre stuff. Like she was on the most recent season of the last season of Star Trek Picard for a few episodes, which is pretty neat, I think. But I really like, I feel like from the beginning, like you can kind of see like some of the deliveries of a couple of the other sisters, occasionally a little bit wooden. I don't ever really feel that way with her.
No.
You know, it's funny. So, because I adore Tiffany, and you know, obviously, I think a lot of folks know her family has been through it over the last few years because her daughter was one of the shooting victims in Saugus. So it's been strange because there's been like actual like political ads here when we were doing our preliminary election like last month, was it? I can't even remember now. Time means nothing to me. But like her and her daughter are in those ads, which was like so surreal to me. But what's interesting to me is because my mom was visiting here at Christmas, and she was just like, oh, she's like, I really want to watch like a fun Christmas movie. And somehow she ended up like finding the Lifetime or the Hallmark. I don't even remember if it was Lifetime or if it was Hallmark. So she found this Christmas movie with the girl from Fresh Prince. And I was like, okay. And then Tiffany pops up in it. And I was like, wow, that's weird. And then when I was looking at like doing like my research for this, it turns out Devin Hamilton was one of the editors for that movie as well.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of crossover. Well, we've seen a lot of crossover with those kind of hallmarky Christmas movies and full moon movies. They're made at a similar clip and often by the same people. Yeah, it looks like Devin Hamilton didn't really direct much after this movie, but he does edit a lot of those films.
Yeah. But it was just really funny because I was like, wait, that's Tiffany. And then when I was going back through and I was like, oh my God, wait, that guy edited this as well. That's so strange. So, but yeah, her daughter is here. Like she's been to the White House. She goes on speaking engagements. She's in college now. But it's crazy, like, because Tiffany's probably one of the first like celebrities that I met when I moved here. Super freaking cool, super fun. And I was like, you're somebody's mom now. Like, it's really fun. So
yeah. No, that's really funny. One thing we didn't realize when we started doing this show, and we did an interview early in the run of the show last summer with Sam Irvin, the director, and he was talking about work that he did, and then like David Dakota and Fred Olin Ray and all these guys. I didn't realize how thick the center of the Venn diagram between full moon and Hallmark movies was.
Yeah, no, it really is. Yeah.
And I keep learning that more and more.
Yeah. I mean, this movie, the basic plot outline of this movie is just that there is a sorority in Southern California that is making a lot of money selling their custom meat pies in a nice little nod to Sweeney Todd that, of course, are turned out to be made of other stupid college boys who are lured in by the beautiful women.
And Auntie Lee's meat pies.
Oh, yes, that as well. Yeah, a little bit of both. Yeah, and the headmistress is played by Julie Strain, and she has started the sorority back in the 80s after an unfortunate manslaughter, I guess, an accidental murder, and has just developed a taste for human flesh ever since, to a delightfully cartoonish degree. And she has a silly machine in her basement, and they've got this whole elaborate setup that they use to send the girls out into bars to lure people back. Sometimes those plans get derailed by drunken bar floozies who try and start a fight with them, as happens from time to time. And but mostly that's and then we bring in Brinke Stevens late in the movie, almost more than halfway through the movie, as kind of the co-founder of the sorority, who is asked to come back and put a stop to the events that are going on. But of course, there's a lot of twists and turns going from there. Yeah, male characters are pretty non-essential in this movie for the most part. The biggest male character is Tobias, played by Joe Dane, who is like the low-level employee in the dean's office who notices people going missing. And then there we have the dean, who was involved in the original murder and has been covering it up ever since. But really, the rest of the boys are kind of just like, beefcakes who wander by and then get turned into beefcake in lots of different interesting ways.
Well done.
So she cuts a flank off of one boy at one point and calls it beef carpaccio, which is sure, yeah, why not? But yeah, I mean, I was laughing at a lot of this movie just because it is so hilariously low rent in a lot of ways. Like I mentioned, she's got this big machine made of like PVC piping and like random cranks from antique stores and things like that. And all I could see when I thought of it was the episode of 30 Rock where they're doing the skit about the fart machine that won't stop farting, and like it's made from old water bottles and tubes and pipings and things like that. It just looks like somebody tried to build a robot and then decided to reform it into this meat machine.
Made me laugh.
Yeah. No, I think there's a good kind of gleefully campy spirit to this entire thing that, we do hit a lot of moments on this show where it's just like, okay, this was fun for a little bit, but this has overstayed its welcome. And like, we're adding on like exposition that we don't really need, or characters that we don't really need. And this movie doesn't really feel like that. We do get the other twist character, who is the house mother's assistant, who gets sentenced to the basement early in the film for partaking in the flesh of a man's penis, which they say is verboten. They're not allowed to eat any penis because it's filled with sperm and germs. But this girl just really wanted to eat the guy's penis, and then she gets sentenced to the basement for most of the movie, where she gradually turns into Gollum, like starts talking to herself and snarling, and like eventually breaks out, kills everybody, and becomes the new house mother. That is kind of a nice twist that like the hero at the end of this movie ends up in bondage gear, eating people like as a servant to this crazy lady who lived in the basement. There is no like, there is no like positive resolution here for him.
Except that the meatloaf is probably pretty good.
It's probably pretty good. No, I would not doubt that at all. I would not.
Well, I love that she jumps out of the like basement where she's hidden in tattered clothing, like she's like David Banner, like
Yeah.
mid transition is really funny. And then and I will say like that opening scene, like that I was kind of brought right in from the beginning because okay, if you were unsure of what kind of movie Shadow Entertainment was going to be producing for you here, your question is answered when you hear the first note of the music that plays.
Yeah.
And it's just like, all right, this is going to be like, softcore in some way, but then they go full, like, like a blowjob castration scene to start the movie. And I was like, all right, okay. Like that's a swing to start this thing. So I appreciate that they did that. It was a little bit more
to a absolutely glorious early 2000s title card of like, how do we even describe this? It's just like cymbals full of white noise that then explode. Like, I don't know what they were going for with these titles, but
it was an aesthetic. I'll say that much, and it was popular back then. It was that one, and then the one we don't have a name for it, but we referred to it in another movie where it's like the "You wouldn't steal a car" ad font.
Yeah.
I don't know what that's technically called, but those two were like the things you saw the most. It's like any movie started, and I'm like, and I'm going to be lectured about pirating music right now. Is that what's happening?
I mean, it sets a bar. Right out of the gates, and it's like, okay, if we keep clearing this bar, we've done our job, and I think they do.
Yeah.
I think it doesn't dawdle. It gets in and gets out. And I actually like sort of the interview footage, which never really is explained why it's even in there. Like it's just there, but like I'm into it.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I'm watching like an episode of The Simple Life or something. She's like carrying her dog and. I'm like, I don't know what this little blurb is for. Like, is it for the college? Is it just for you? Like, but I don't know that I care. And I think also too, like, as somebody who like absolutely adores Motel Hell, like this is very much like if Motel Hell was at like a sorority. Like, I feel like Farmer Vincent would be like their ideal like house dad that would just come by, give the girls some recipes and teach them how to like, what do they call it? Skin. It wasn't skin the meat.
I think it
wasn't
it. It wasn't skin the meat. I thought it was skin the meat, or it's something like that.
Yeah, but I think he'd like come over and give them like really good tips on how to like harvest their crops, if you will.
Well, they got to branch out. They need pies, and fritters. I was laughing looking at the one of the areas where obviously the budget is really noticeable is like when they would have these prepared foods and they make a big deal talking about how homemade these pies are out of this meat, and then it's just like the world's smallest like banquet frozen pot pie that someone put down on the table, and I was like, that's not a pie somebody just made. Like that was frozen, that's in the freezer section of your grocery store. Like, please, I was hoping, like I think you gotta, if you're talking about a meat pie and the pie is really the draw, because I took that interview footage as being like an ad for the Delta pies, and it's like you need like a big appetizing pie to look at, maybe sitting on a windowsill with a little like steam coming off of it or something. It's really like the world's most pathetic frozen pie that they show, but you know what? The testimonials are in, and the pies are good, allegedly.
Yeah,
I'm willing to bet that was probably craft services for the day too.
Probably, yeah. Here's your dinner, and this is also your paycheck.
I mean, I take a baggie of chicken wings any day for dinner, so I'm not picky.
Hey,
but
why not?
I was just like, somebody after they shot all that stuff, they were like, okay, time for dinner, and then went on with their day.
Yep, yep. Every time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's a guerrilla filmmaking aspect to this that I like. But there is a level, like we were talking before about some like generous reads and some faint praise of this movie. Like I do think that there is a lot going on in this movie that's easy to like. And I think it's a silly premise. I think this is the kind of thing that if you wandered on in the middle of the night, you would have the reaction like your partner had, which was like, why are you watching Skinamax right now? And it's sort of like at first glance kind of irredeemable. It's one of those movies where yeah, someone walks in and looks at it and kind of just shakes their head at you like what exactly is this? But it has a lot of redeeming qualities, and I feel like we've watched some stuff from either the same period or just before where everything is like a slog and it's low budget, but everything feels so weird and stagey and stilted. And I don't get that quite as much here. Like I think this thing does kind of flow like a movie in a lot of ways. And I think there is it obviously looks like shit, like we said before, but I think it feels like it reminds me, Heather, I don't know how familiar you are with this movie, but we were guests on another podcast called Movie Dumpster, where we talked about the movie Ragdoll.
Mm.
And Ragdoll was one where I feel like we both
Oh.
went in with zero expectation. Neither of us had seen it. And I remember, and it was a Ted Nicolau one too. So I was like, I'm going to expect some level of professionalism. And the opening couple of scenes, it took me a minute to get used to just how low budget it was. So it was similar to this, like something made in about a week and a half for a budget of under $100,000. And I remember like once I was able to get past to just how cheap it looked, I started to notice these things where it was actually, camera movement and things staged like a movie. It wasn't just two characters static standing talking in a room, which I think you could possibly expect that of this if you saw just the movie and the poster. But I think there is some cinematic language being used here, and it just makes it once you get over the cheapness, makes it such a more enjoyable watch than some of the other things that we've had to sit through for this show already.
Yeah.
But like Ragdoll was surprisingly good once we got used to how cheap it looked. It was like, oh no, this is a fun story with a bunch of committed actors made by someone who is capable to somehow. What I think the thing that I'm noticing now is like, I don't want to, obviously we do get a little hyperbolic on the show from time to time, but when you think about the parameters of something like this, like 10 days to make it $75,000 and that you're able to come out with something that's watchable, I think is a testament to the filmmaker, because I'm like, man, you're really like at odds. And the fact that you get something made at all is sort of remarkable. And the fact that this one actually, the comedy works from time to time. It's got some fun gore in it. I wouldn't say, and I don't think it's their intention that it's ever scary. I don't think it's supposed to be scary at any point, but I do like, I think it's impressive that they could take 10 days and 75 grand and churn out something that has as much sort of logical cinematic flow as this movie does. And I'm noticing that more as our show goes on. I'm like, I'm less and less nitpicky and more about like, wow, they did this how fast for how little money? That's pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, I think also too, I think in this regard, like it helps when your cast is super dialed in. Because none of those girls are getting paid a lot of money, but they're all there because they're obviously having fun. Like there is like a twinkle in their eye, like when they're talking, and you're like, oh yeah, they're in it, like they're having like a good time. Like the scene when Patrice and Clarice go to the bar, like you could tell all those women were just having a blast.
Oh yeah.
And I think that makes a huge difference because, like, I mean, I've seen movies that have had like 500 times that budget and everybody looks bored and you feel it.
Yeah.
So I think that makes a huge difference. And I think also too, like, you have guys like who came up during the 70s and 80s, like the Henenlotters, the Larry Cohens, that could make magic out of nothing. And I think that's something that like Charles Band, from like a producer standpoint, is really, really good at. He has a really great eye for talent who can go in there, kind of get the job done. And he knows he's going to get something that people at some level are going to enjoy. And if they don't, they're at least going to talk about it.
Yeah.
You know, because I think for him, he's always just like, I just want people to like continue to talk about these things. Like, I remember he was giving like a big, I don't want to say lecture, but like he did this huge speech like on Ginger Dead Man. And he was like, look, he was like, we knew the kind of movie we were making. We had the title, we knew exactly what we were in for. And he was like, I could have gone either way with it. He's like, but the way we went with it is the way that I knew in 20 years, people are still going to be talking about Ginger Dead Man. And sure enough, we are.
Sure enough, two losers with a podcast with nothing better to do talked about that movie and its amazingly titled sequel, The Passion of the Crust, in an episode that dropped only a few weeks ago.
Yeah. So like, I mean, the thing is, it's like, I'm of the opinion, like, I always want people to get paid, but honestly, like, there's something about sort of going through the boot camp essence of indie filmmaking where you kind of really earn your stripes in a lot of ways. Does it mean you shouldn't be paid? No, of course not. You should be paid. But the thing is, it's like, sometimes you just go out there and you make movies with your friends. And I legitimately feel like when I'm watching this, it was a group of friends who got together and made a movie.
Absolutely.
And you know what I mean? It wasn't just like they were all hired to serve like it just felt like a really good back and forth. And I think that can make a difference. Because I haven't seen Bleed. I know that came out like right around the same time. But I'd be curious to see, like, I know Julie was in that too, but I don't know if like the dynamic was the same because some of the cast is different. I'd be really curious to kind of like almost pit them against each other to see like, was the vibes the same or was it like a little different on that one because different cast and everything like that. So yeah.
Well, I'm curious to watch those. I know Devin Hamilton speaks about this one more highly than those two because, well, Julie and Brink are in both of those, but they're cameos. They're kind of just like walk on single scenes. So they don't really get to cut loose as much. And two, like he felt like he was really making the movie to order the way that Charles Band often does. Just like, all right, what do video stores want right now? They want more Scream type movies. Okay, I'm going to make a Scream type movie and then sell it like that. So I think he felt like those were movies to get him in the door. And this was the movie he more wanted to make. I read an interview with him where he did specifically cite Sorority Babes and the Slimeball Bolorama as a direct influence on this. He wanted to do a movie with a lot of campy energy and low budget effects and like a lot of, this is clearly something that he loves to do, and probably is having more fun making this one than the other two.
We're not missing in this movie. We're not missing an imp.
We are not missing an imp.
At no point did I say this movie needs an imp. I appreciate the nods to Sorority Babes, but I did not need that aspect of it. And I just wanted to point out before we've mentioned the girls in the bar a few times without calling the fact that they are in fact Tootie and Trixie.
Oh yes,
which are two fun character names, and one of the actresses is like Scottish and one's like Australian or something. I thought was really funny, and they're doing these like kind of exaggerated Southern drawls, kind of, at least to my memory. But kind of funny how they're always kind of just like sitting there, and it's like they make a comment in one of them where they ask if the one male character showed up, and they're like, no, and we've been watching the door all night. I like that backstory. I like that these two just hang out 24/7 in this bar, and they're like the sheriffs of this bar, and they know exactly what's going on all the time. I like that. Yeah, and I think I don't know. I was thinking back, and this movie made me think. Like I feel like I have a soft spot for sorority-based horror movies. I don't really know why. What it is about the aesthetic. I went to a small private college for my bachelor's degree forever ago, and I lived with my girlfriend just off campus, and so I made zero friends because I never went to a single party, and I wasn't a resident, and I didn't know anyone, and so I didn't meet people really that were in fraternities or sororities. But there's something about these movies always stands out to me. Like Sorority Babes and the Slimeball Bolorama, obviously a ton of fun, but I really love like House on Sorority Row. Like just such a fun, weird movie with a Richard Band soundtrack or original score, by the way, which is really fun. And then there's just like a murderous little jester doll at the end out of nowhere. It's super fun. But yeah, I don't know. And it's one of those subgenres. I mean, I think it's Sorority House Massacre. That one's basically just a carbon copy of Halloween. which has its moments. But yeah, I don't know. You set is it Scream 2 is set in a sorority at one point, I believe, too.
It's at a
Yeah.
college. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you just I can remember Sarah Michelle Gellar in the
No.
thing.
Sororities play into it. There is Delta Lambda. There's also Omega Beta Zeta.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit of a Scream nerd, so I apologize. But
yeah, do you have besides Scream 2? I mean, if you're a Scream head, we'll take Scream 2 out of the occasion. If you had to pick one of these and I love Hell Night also, which I mentioned earlier. If you had to pick like a college / fraternity type horror movie, what's your favorite? What's your the one you're taking to a desert island with you?
You know, honestly, and this sounds so crazy, but I mean, obviously Black Christmas is always going to be like the benchmark movie.
Duh. And I didn't even say that one, and that's like probably
No, that's okay. But I think a movie that doesn't, I mean, it's coming around to getting the love it deserves, but it still, I think, needs more, is actually the Sorority Row remake. I really dig it. It was not the movie I expected going into it. It's completely different. It's, I believe, I want to say written by, oh my gosh, why am I blanking on names right now? It was Josh Stolberg is one of the co-writers on it, and Pete Goldfinger. They're the guys who work with like the Saw franchise. Yeah, and so like I went into it just looking for like a fun horror movie, and it's like so much better. It's got a really great cast, like Brianna Evigan's in it, Rumor Willis is in it, Jamie Chung. It's really fantastic deaths. I think the ending takes a few extra steps that it doesn't need, but I don't mind it.
Okay.
But it's super badass. And it's funny because I remember like my very first Comic-Con, I moved out here like in April. So my first Comic-Con was July. And I remember one of the first things I did when I was at Comic-Con was we did roundtables for Sorority Row, which I remember because we were at a table with a woman who wrote for a Supernatural magazine. So her job was to ask everybody if they believed in ghosts or if they saw ghosts when they were working on the movies that they were working on, which was really weird because it was like Sorority Row and Astro Boy. It was very strange. but like I still have my magnet where it's like says Theta Pi must die. So Delta Delta Die kind of ties right into that. But like if you've never seen it, it's totally not the movie I was expecting. And I love it. I rewatch it every October.
Oh, that's amazing.
You're the first person I've heard go to bat for that one. I've never really heard anybody speak about that remake. So that's, yeah.
In about 5 years, everybody's going to say they've always loved it. So that's what happens because like I was the first person to like really go to bat for Scream 4 back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that movie is shit. Blah, 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 blah. And it was like about 5 years later, everyone's like, Scream 4 is actually pretty good. And I was just like, to come join me on my hill that I've been dying on.
Well, speaking of fraternity stuff, like I only recently saw the Black Christmas remake because I avoided it for a really long time because I was like, I don't need to see that. And I feel like I equated it to the absolutely horrendous, in my opinion, Prom Night remake.
Oh yeah.
Ooh,
and so I was like, I'm not gonna watch that. And I heard from a number of people whose tastes I trusted. They were like, no, you should watch the Black Christmas remake. It's actually surprisingly good. It's better than you think it would be. And I popped it on maybe a month or two ago for the very first time. And I had fun with it. I mean, if I'm choosing the classic, the original over it, if I'm like forced to choose, but I had a really good time with that one. And I was surprised by that. And I think, it's sometimes on paper, you kind of roll your eyes. You're like, oh, another remake. But some of them are done by the right people for the right reasons. And there's no reason why you can't live in a world where you have both. Like one doesn't negate the other, one doesn't ruin your childhood.
And now we have flesh cookies as like a Christmas tradition. So
there we go. Well, I think that's a perfect note to end this episode on talking about flesh cookies. So thank you, Heather, so much for being here and lending your expertise for Delta Delta Die, and then for bringing this to our attention too. This is not a movie we would have gotten to for a while. So I was glad to watch it. I had a really fun time with it. Where can people find your amazing stuff?
So these days I've kind of taken a breather from doing sort of like the weekly entertainment journalism stuff. But all of my stuff still always exists over at dailydead.com. I'm sort of doing more of the book stuff and also kind of like essays with special releases. In fact, like this week in the UK, they're releasing a special box set for Brandon Cronenberg's Possessor, which I was beyond stoked to get to write an essay for that, because it's probably one of my favorite modern horror movies.
Oh, yeah.
And I guarantee when we wrap up the 2020s, it's still going to be amongst like my top 5.
Wow.
But yeah, like you can just find me on socials, like pretty much everywhere is at the Horror Chick. But yeah, it's kind of strange. Like usually I'm like, oh, just go to Daily Dud and I'm doing this and that. And I'm like, oh wow, that's so not me anymore. So, but yeah, if you're interested, you can find out more about the In Search of Darkness book over at the publisher's website, which is aminc.publishing.com. They're still doing orders for that. And then also for anybody who's living in LA, we are doing a special signing for the book on April 27th, where it'll be myself and my co-author, Patrick Bromley, as well as a bunch of different horror legends coming out to sign the book. I just wanted to do something fun for the fans out there, because I know it's an expensive book. I want to make it worth their while. Who the hell am I? But, you know, come get your book signed by Joe Dante.
There you go.
It's basically my pitch, because like, yeah, I wrote it, but it's Joe Dante who's about to do a new movie. So, you know, let's get him while we can. But yeah, that's pretty much about it for me.
That's amazing. I'm super excited for that book because I love the documentaries. And I was telling Steve earlier on off mic that I am just so highly suggestible for certain kinds of items, and a nice book, you know, that just anthologizes all of the things that were discussed in the documentaries with, you know, nice photos and stuff for me to put on my coffee table or in my bookshelf. It's like, just take all of my money, please, because those are the kinds of things that I spend my money on all the time. And so, you know, I look forward to when my pre-ordered one comes, and I'm not just saying that to plug it on the show. I have ordered one. I am super excited about it. And yeah, it's one of the things I'm looking most forward to arriving at my house in, you know, the next couple of weeks or months. And I'm excited because I love those documentaries. And if you love what we do, you can jump onto Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever you're listening. Drop us a quick 5-star rating or maybe a brief review if you feel so inclined to do so. You can follow us on all kinds of social media. We are on Instagram. We are on X, we are on Threads and Blue Sky, and you can listen to our episodes on YouTube as well. If you want to follow us on Instagram, the show is at puppetmasters_Castle Freaks. I can be found at _Giallo_Jerry, and Steve at Minotaur Matador. But we are not the only show that Steve would like to take this opportunity to plug. So Steve, what else have you got cooking?
Absolutely. I have a show called Cinema Arcade. That's cinema and arcade all pushed together, because that is what we do. We are talking about movies and the video games that are based on those movies to contrast, compare, and give us a pretty wide range of all the different things we're going to be talking about. So very excited about that show. We're having a lot of fun. We're watching the Rocky movies right now. There are three Rocky movies for three Rocky games for 3 Rocky movies. So we're getting a nice run of the series there. And then we've just got more than 50-something episodes else out there, covering everything from E.T. to Balls of Fury. So whatever flavor you like, we've got a little bit of everything for you. And we've got a couple of things for you next week as well, because we are returning to the giant robot territory. And of course, we need a guide for that. So we're bringing John Tarani back on the show to talk about Crash and Burn and Robot Wars, 2 movies that were sort of unofficial remakes, sequels, ripoffs of Robot Jox, Stuart Gordon's Robot Jox. We talked with John before. John Tarani, for those who may not remember, is kind of the world's leading expert on this particular subgenre of movies, specifically Robot Jox. He's got an amazing collection of Robot Jox material. So we're very excited to have him back to talk about these 2. So Crash and Burn and Robot Wars are the 2 movies we're watching. Be sure to check those out.
The people spoke and we listened, and they said, we want more John because there's a lot more of these giant robot movies. And so we delivered. So join us next week, everybody, for Crash and Burn and Robot Wars. And we will see you next time.